There's something to be said about bringing practical or bringing spiritual concepts down to earth, about these abstract concepts, that are really spiritual and ethereal into practical terms. And some people some people do that very well. You see spiritual teachers, spiritual content creators on YouTube, astrologers do that really well. There are some that don't do so well at that. And there's one in particular, and I'm not going to name who this is, but there's one in particular that I have watched videos from. I've watched her videos and I've had to unsubscribe from her. Well, I haven't had to, but I made the decision to unsubscribe. And the reason why I unsubscribed is because over and over I kept hearing the same, phrases and the same things over and over again. Higher consciousness, times of healing and transformation, times of transition, connecting with the earth and sky. All of these kinds of things, all of this, you know, material that is spoken over and over again. And what does it mean? What does it really mean? Rather than just being in the same rut and hamster wheel that is being repeated over and over. And it gets tiresome. And, I'm going to say that, astrological events are different and are specific and special for a lot of reasons. And to just, for example, if you were to, make a video about one astrological event, then that is going to be different than a video about another astrological event. Now, we all repeat ourselves, but there's a difference between doing that and saying, you're talking about an astrological event, but you're saying the same things about different astrological events, the same exact things, with not a whole lot of variety in what you're talking about. And that gets to be, tiresome for, the audience. And the audience is not going to understand and see the value of what you're saying. Is it a prediction? Is it a collective overview? Is it a prescription? For what you're talking about with a spiritual and astrological video. What's the meaning into this? And how can I, be inspired and empowered and apply this to my own life, for example? And so, there are many astrologers, some more, left brain than others, where it doesn't have to be this really big, thing, such as, manifestation, you know, all of those types of things like that. But how can it be, more down to earth? And that's really important, because Saturn is in Pisces right now. And so Saturn is structure, it's order. It wants to make things materialize. It wants to put a form to something. And it doesn't want the chaos that Pisces is, because Pisces, it's not necessarily turbulence, but it's not an organized energy. And so Saturn is the bricks and order, the mortar. We want those foundations, and it's a good opportunity, to, to talk about all these concepts if you, create videos on these types of things and try to bring it down to concrete terms, to try to blend both the material and the spiritual realms. together. And, you know, sometimes, we're just disappointed. I was seeing on my, sort of, seeing the, videos, of YouTube videos, and then seeing, a video. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting video. And so I thought it would be, neat to hear what this person had to say about a topic, this topic. And it ended up being the same things over and over again with, not a lot of value in the video. So, that's important to consider is how can there be structure? You know, another example is, I was taking, a class that I thought I would enjoy and I thought that I would get a lot out of. It was a music class. And, I was very disappointed because, this whole situation with the, teacher, not necessarily teaching it, but, getting off on talking about these things that did not have to do with it. And some other topics were personal stories and others were more taboo, topics, um, you know, kind of sensitive issues. And um, that was going on. There was no structure to the class, no syllabus, no, textbook, no nothing. And it was very disappointing. And I didn't get what I wanted out of it. And so then this teacher left all of a sudden, and then somebody else filled in, trying to catch everyone up. And it ended up being very disappointing that it wasn't the experience. And, where, sort of another issue is, looking at somebody, for who they are, not to say, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity. This is a great opportunity. And it might be disappointing. You might be disappointed. Something that you thought would be a certain way, someone that you thought would be a certain way. The saying is all that glitters is not gold. There was another teacher whom at first was overwhelmingly draining in terms of how he was speaking and teaching, and I was shocked because I had never had an experience with sitting in a classroom with a teacher who spoke in a particular way. But then, I got used to it, and then it became, neutrally positive, let's just say, a neutrally positive experience. And that's something also to consider. And then some experiences that you have are just neutral. And, so that is, um, also, important. Another thing, that I want to talk about, just, on this video is several, astrologers. And the one thing that I'm really, annoyed by is when certain placements or certain aspects are put on pedestals. Trines and sextiles in the natal chart are better, easier energies and more positive energies as opposed to squares and oppositions. And astrologers say that certain astrological placements are easier than others. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with placements being better than others, aspects being better than others. I don't agree with that. They all have their strengths and weaknesses in their own way, and their own different ways. Um, for example, more growth and more happiness and fulfillment and more meaning can probably come from those people who have a lot of squares and oppositions in their chart, in their natal birth chart in astrology, because a majority of my videos are astrological on my channel. And then others who have a lot of trines and sextiles. Those are easier aspects. But, what about more, evolution? And maybe there are, a lot of aspects of life that are meant to be challenging. Something that you can work for to achieve. And so that is your Saturn placement, which is, that hard lifelong lesson that you're coming in, not knowing, but you're learning how to cultivate. You're learning how to be the master of. You're becoming really disciplined and really focused and determined in that process. I don't want to energize when astrologers say this placement is an exaltation, this placement is detriment, this placement is fall. I don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that. Because that is putting some placements above others. And there is no astrological placement that is better than any other astrological placement. Astrological placements are not better or worse in the natal chart. They are just different. And there are negatives and positives on both sides. I would argue that some placements are not, easier or more difficult than others. They all have their downsides. They all can be detrimental and exalted. A Venus in Scorpio is going to love and value different things than a Venus in Taurus. I have Jupiter in Virgo, and I've heard and read things about Jupiter in Virgo being, because Jupiter is the big picture. Jupiter is fun. It is joy. It is luck. It is boundless optimism. And there's a sense of excitement and carefree energy with Jupiter. A party kind of energy with Jupiter. And Virgo isn't so much about the big picture, but it's also about the small details of things. And it is about taking care of those details. And it's ruled by Gemini, so it's a mercurial or intellectual air sign. And, maybe astrologers say that it is detriment because it can get caught in the details and analyzing and getting so bogged down in, what is negative and what is flawed. And we all can do that. We all do it. At some point or another, we all judge ourselves. We all get critical. We all get too lost in the details. And so, you have this placement and you express these qualities which are negative. That doesn't make the person feel better. I was watching somebody who had a video about Jupiter in Virgo. It was not just the placement. It was, when Jupiter, the last time Jupiter was in Virgo, from, I think it was August 11th of 2015 through September 9, I think, 2016. This particular astrologer was talking about Jupiter in Virgo and only talking about what was negative instead of talking about, the opportunity that Jupiter can Virgo, the invitation it can be. I think that it's about having ideas and wanting to travel and do new things and explore and experience joy. But you're also delivering in a material way. You're checking things off the list. You're applying it down to earth, with the plan. And you're not getting caught in, positive energy, but you are making sure that things are taken care of and that things are done right. And that you're doing things with, accuracy and quality. To make a vision or a dream a reality. And, I think that, no placement should be described as being less or more than any other. And it's wrong and irresponsible for astrologers to do that. Because life is not either or. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not binary. It's so easy to understand that and learn that to be true. But the whole detriment, fall, exaltation, that's just a belief. That is just, a belief. As I said again, difficult, more difficult placements, more challenging placements. But what if there is more opportunity? Or what if there's a different opportunity of, growth and, learning and evolution in those, more challenging placements? And, also, we associate challenging with negative, easy with good. That's just a mental, emotional, psychological association. And, even though I've said it before, in my videos, I've inserted this placement was detriment, this and this. I did not do that of my own accord. I did that because it was learned and I believed that piece of information. And I just want to own up for the fact that I gave those pieces of information. But that's not what I believe. Even if it may be fact, I don't believe it to be so. It is a belief. It is a belief. It's about being open-minded, viewing different perspectives of things. And it's not so narrow as being detriment, fall, exaltation. Certain planets rule certain signs, but that doesn't mean that that planet is any happier in that sign than others. That doesn't mean that placement is better. I don't think planets should be personified as being people who are happier in one sign, happier in, the other side, even if it was explained really well, because that is, again, a belief and a projection. So, that is what I'm going to say about all of these different things that are, kind of coming about. Another issue is, with the nodal axis. We're thinking about the south node and north node. That also isn't either or. We need to surrender the either or mentality, even if certain pieces of information are accurate. And, it's about the north node and the south node being in tandem, being balanced. You're balancing the two qualities out. Yes, moving toward your north node. Yes, there is the south node and the north node, and they mean different things, but it's also both and. Balancing the south node and north node qualities. About taking, releasing the shadow sides of whatever sign the south node is in to move into that north node. And I think also with kind of the logical aspects of astrology, with saying this particular thing because it's just right to say and it makes you look good and it's good on a material level. It sounds good. It sounds professional. It's accurate. And, it's really all about surrendering the need to only talk about so much information and make certain points and make the videos a certain length of time and talk about all this information. But where is the heart in certain videos? Where is the real spiritual meaning and value that is, relatable? That is something, I guess, moving is possibly something, but something, where it's, I guess, more prescriptive, but also to where you're really getting into, the meaning of certain things and, delving deep and getting real and getting authentic about what this means to you. Really speaking from your heart and not just, your head. Like, what does it really mean? And, how do you feel, the information that you're delivering as opposed to just knowing it intellectually. And, we can't always do that. And that can be, difficult to do at certain times. Depends upon what kind of information that you're delivering and how you feel about it. But, the main points is, getting out of, just to summarize, getting out of the same cycle over and over again of repeating the same things just because you think that they sound good, but it's really repetitive and meaningless. That's one point. Getting out of either or thinking, is another point. And just saying, giving meaning into things as opposed to what would look good on the material level. I would, please your ego and, this, that stuff. So those are some things to think about. So thank you for tuning